TNCradio.live, your commercial driver navigation station.
Welcome in TNCradio.live. This is Clutch Time Sports. Sorry, lost my voice halfway through. Clutch Time Sports with Anderson and Banker.
That's what you get there, Mr. Kelly, for talking about daylight savings time. That's called karma, baby. Karma in the worst way. Good evening, all you wonderful truckers out there, male and female, on the byways, highways, and the freeways. I'm your co-host, I'm Anderson, along with my good friend Josh Banker, on a beautiful Wednesday night, and I am traveling. I've done 2 states now. I went from hot to cold, or should I say from hot to cold. So now I'm up here back in the frozen tundra with a little bit of warmth. JB, how's Cali doing right now, my friend?
It's we're still getting a bunch of rain today, not as much as yesterday, but I find it funny that our show turns into the first 2 minutes of our Doppler weather forecast. Over the last anytime you get rain in Southern California, it's like, oh, sky is falling. What are we gonna do? It's rain.
You know what? I love my family back east when they watch the news, because they'll go, "Hey, are those floods by you? Did they happen to you? Are you guys okay?" And we're like, "That's way up north. We're fine." But it happens on the other side too. A tornado touchdown somewhere in Michigan. I'm like, "Hey, are you guys okay? Is there a tornado by you?"
It just means you have family that cares about you, Ivan. That's good.
Yeah, it is. I just love it. It's so funny. We have a lot to cover today, everyone. We have 4 quarters, and we have so much to cover, mainly because we decided to do the MLB preview. Of course, the American League was last week and now the National League this week, but we would be remiss if we did not say anything and cover some type of section of NCAA D1 March Madness. And it is starting off with a bang, or should we say a whimper, with some of the play-in games, JB. They were just miserable yesterday. At least one game was.
They were close, at least. But, yeah, I don't know why I don't really find these compelling until they're actually playing on Thursday and Friday, because then I can come into my office with my double screens here at my desk and have one on with the games on, basically from sun up until sundown. That's kind of the blessing of being on the West Coast. You start off at 9 a.m. here, and then all of a sudden you're going home after a full day's work and still watching the games until 10 or 11 o'clock at night on a opening weekend. Or actually, the first 2 weekends are really like that. So that's my gear up time for sure.
And I love this time of the year, but you made a really good point. You said this is a crapshoot this year. It's anybody's game.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, North Carolina's not even in this. This is very strange territory.
Yeah, I printed out my bracket and have it here in front of me. And what's interesting is, as I look through what I had just chosen on my selections, obviously this is my opinion and everything, but I have a lot of chalk, so to speak. I don't have any team that is a below an 11 seed winning any games this year, which is kind of unusual, because there's a lot of 5-12s that usually happens in upsets and some occasional, 13s versus 4s. But what I found interesting as I looked through this is that while I have a lot of chalk, I only have one number 1 seed actually getting to the Final Four. But I have Alabama getting to the title game. But I have all 4 number 2s making the Elite 8. So it's just kind of an interesting, again, I threw basically darts at the wall to pick up all these games this year, because it's such a crapshoot, like you said, that I will be either very right or very wrong.
Well, that's like everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, sure. You look at it, you've got Alabama and Houston, which I honestly have to say, I did not see Houston having that kind of a season this year. I didn't know they recruited like that. And they stayed at the top of the food chain the entire season. Alabama, unfortunately, Tom doesn't like Alabama. I really don't like Alabama. I wish we could talk about Alabama without all the bull crap that comes along with them. But unfortunately, someone's life was lost. And that's an unfortunate situation. But as you can see, pardon the pun, money trumps anything that has to deal with the law. But Alabama and Houston both, sitting there as 1 seeds, and then Purdue and I can't remember who's the fourth one. I got Purdue, Kansas. I mean, I'm not impressed. I would say 2 of the 4 I'm impressed with, Alabama and Houston. But Purdue and Kansas, I'm honestly not impressed this year. And you know how it goes. It's the same thing that happens in any sport. It's kind of a hangover. I would say college has it less than all the other major professional sports. But there's still a little bit of a hangover after you win a national title, especially if you do it with a mid-level or young team. So they come back and they get a chance to do it again. But I agree with you. It's kind of anybody's game this year.
It is, and it's as I again look at my bracket. My Final Four. I've got a bunch of blue bloods. After all is said and done, I mean, it could be who knows? It could be Grand Canyon. It could be Utah State. It could be Penn State. Who knows? It could be Colgate. I mean, we could have the cleanest teeth and the best basketball in the nation. But as I went through and did my bracket, I've got Alabama and Duke on one side of the bracket of the Final Four, and I've got Texas and UConn on the other side of the bracket. So out of Houston's region, which is the Midwest, I have them and Texas actually in the Elite Eight, with Texas winning. And then in the West, where Kansas is the 1 seed, I have UConn upsetting Kansas in the Sweet 16 and then beating UCLA in the Elite Eight to go to the Final Four. In the East, I have Duke, who's a number 5 seed, beating the number 1 seed Purdue in the Sweet 16, with Marquette reaching the Elite Eight, for whom Duke will beat to get to the Final Four. And then I have Alabama and Arizona. That's almost straight chalk in the South, in that region, with Alabama getting to the Final Four as well.
I'm concerned about Marquette, and I was talking to a person today who actually graduated from Marquette, and I said, if there's a Cinderella team, it's Vermont. And I believe if I'm thinking of the same team, the last time Vermont appeared in this tournament was in 2003. That is scary to me. I don't want to play. I'm going in there, if I'm Marquette, and I am just blowing that team away. I'm not even giving them a chance to breathe. I'm doing full court press. I'm all up in their underwear. Like, you're not getting any points, because I'm not going to be that team that you get that Cinderella dance and you're advancing. No. I'm knocking you out and moving on. So that's fun.
And if Virginia, as a number 1 seed, losing in the first round a few years ago to the number 16 seed, has taught anybody anything, is that it doesn't matter what your seed is anymore in this tournament. You have to go in preparing like it is your absolute last game. You can't just automatically assume that if you're a 1 or 2 seed, you're going to beat that opposing team by 30 or 40 points. It just doesn't happen anymore.
It doesn't.
No.
And you know what it is? It's because of the professional sports, not just the United States, but abroad. It has made there's a lot of parity now in NCAA basketball. I mean, like you said, that shocked everybody. Everybody's bracket was done that year when a 16 seed knocked out a number 1 seed. We were sitting there going, are you kidding me? And you look at Marquette, you look at UCLA, and you kind of get nervous. And then you look at Northwestern and Boise State, and you look at Michigan State and SC. And, records don't always tell the story. And especially when you're playing at different conferences, it doesn't always give you the full picture. Well, I'm concerned.
If you go back to that Marquette-Vermont matchup, per se, and by the way, who would have ever guessed we'd be talking about this matchup, per se? But what's interesting is that number 2 seeds, even though number 1 seeds have only lost once in the NCAA tournament, number 2 seeds are 138-10 all time in the NCAA tournament. That's a 93% winning percentage. But 6 of those 10 losses have come in the last 10 tournaments. So the reality is that 15s are catching up to number 2, so to speak. And Vermont's actually won 15 straight games coming into this matchup. Now, will they beat Marquette? My bracket says no, but that's the fun thing about this tournament is that you're sitting there with your highlighter and your pen, and you got your bracket in front of you. You're watching the games, and you're like, "Really? Did that? No, come on. We only need 4 more points. We've only got 38 seconds left. But come on, I got a perfect bracket still, and there's 3 games done. So it just that's kind of the best part about all of it is that it's the unpredictability.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And you mentioned a name that I haven't heard in a long time. When's the last time you heard UConn? I mean, think about the last time you really heard about UConn and them being in the top 5 seed. They're a 4 seed. It's been a long time since the Huskies have been ranked that high in this tournament.
Well, it's interesting because you said that the Tar Heels are not even in it this year, and they were in the championship game last year against Kansas. So, that's again why I love this tournament. Even though I will admit I'm not the staunch college basketball fan that maybe I was even 5-10 years ago, but there's just something about this tournament that is always intriguing. And when you see teams like UConn back in, you got only 3 Pac-12 teams in this year, or 4, excuse me. If Arizona State wins today, it'll be 4. But you got USC, UCLA, and Arizona. But if I may, since we're running out of time here in this first quarter, I have Texas winning it all. That's my pick.
The Longhorns?
I have the Longhorns.
Wow.
They're a number 2 seed in the Midwest. I have them beating Alabama 74-67 in the final. And again, it's throwing darts at a board, but that's who I've got as my winner in this year's tournament.
Well, you heard it here, folks. I have not picked my bracket yet. I tend to wait to the last minute because I always second guess and third guess myself. But we've got the second quarter coming up where we're going to jump right into MLB preview for the National Leagues. I know Tom is just sitting there salivating. Baseball, baby. You listen to Clutch Time Sports on TNCRadio.live.
Join Tom Kelly and the rest of the team each day on the Morning Grind. Then stay tuned for an encore presentation of last night's Landline Now. Weekdays on TNCRadio.live. Hauling livestock. 3 things to consider. There are many different types of freight you can haul as a truck driver, and livestock is just one of them. According to the FMCSA, there are roughly 250,000 drivers who are specialty livestock haulers in the United States. Hauling livestock isn't for everyone. It takes a special kind of truck driver with patience and who doesn't mind the smell or getting their hands dirty. Drivers with previous experience in hauling livestock make a great candidate for livestock drivers. However, drivers without livestock experience can still make great livestock truck drivers. Here are 3 things to consider regarding hauling livestock. Different types of livestock. While cattle make up the largest part of the livestock transportation industry, there are many different types of livestock you can haul. Some common examples of livestock loads are chickens, pigs, goats, and sheep. As a truck driver, you can get the necessary training to haul high-value livestock. Animal care. You'll want to be educated on the type of livestock you're hauling so you can provide the best care. Livestock drivers also need to have patience and drive defensively. Higher pay. Due to livestock haulers needing specific requirements, they're paid a higher rate for loading and unloading animals. They're also considered a specialty hauler, so the pay is increased, and for good reason. Drivers hauling livestock must maintain additional certifications to show their understanding of the risks involved in hauling animals. Some risks include escaped livestock, injury, or deck collapsing. Drivers will also have to acquire a specific type of trailer depending on the animals hauled. Livestock haulers need to also consider the biosecurity involved in transporting animals. If your livestock trailer isn't frequently cleaned and disinfected after each load, animals can become infected by feces, blood, and urine, feed and water containers, insects and parasites, live bacteria, or viruses on surfaces. Livestock haulers must be aware of the transmission risks from delivery site to delivery site.
Trucker Farmers Life Radio from TFC Global with your host, Ron Frazier, every Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. On the show, Ron interviews guests to help inform professional drivers just like you about the importance of things like human trafficking to sex addiction to how to overcome the impossible odds on the way to success. Every Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern.
Well, welcome back to the second quarter of Clutch Time Sports here on TNC Radio.live. And don't forget to check us out on Instagram and Twitter at Clutch Time TNC. JB, let's just jump right into it, man. We are talking about the East National League, and you starting off with the Atlanta Braves.
We talking baseball. I want Tom. Do you remember that song, by the way? Talking baseball.
Oh yeah, yeah, of course.
All right, so let's jump back into our MLB preview. We highlighted the American League last week. We got the National League this week. And I know my brother-in-law, Clint, who's actually listening as we speak because he's sent me like 12 texts already, is eager to hear about this one in particular, as he's a big Atlanta Braves fan. He and his Braves, along with the New York Mets, tied at 101 and 61 last year. And knowing that Bryce Harper is probably out until about mid-season All-Star break time for the Phillies, I can't see it being anything much more than another Mets and Braves race again this year. The Mets lost Jacob deGrom to the Rangers, but they got Justin Verlander from Tom's Houston Astros, and they spent almost $500 million this year. So maybe some of that Texas Ranger money came to New York too. But the Mets are deep. Atlanta is very deep. They have some really young players. They lost Dansby Swanson to the Cubs, did the Braves. But they got Vaughn Grissom, who will probably be taking his spot. I just think the major difference between these two teams is Atlanta's on the rise as a young team, where the Mets are trying to hold on with some of their older pitchers, and that's kind of how things look for me. The Phillies won't have Bryce Harper, like I said, probably till the All-Star game, but they got Trey Turner from the Dodgers on an 11-year deal, so it's not like they're going to be without offense with Kyle Schwarber, Rhys Hoskins, JT Realmuto, Nick Castellanos. They really tried to improve their bullpen this year, getting Craig Kimbrell, Gregory Soto, and Matt Strahm. But look out for 20-year-old Andrew Painter. He's 6'7" starting pitcher. Could be a rookie surprise of the year this year. You never know. Marlins and Nationals bringing up the rear. Marlins are kind of on the rise too, but they'd need a 13-game improvement to even be above 500 this year, and that would be a pretty bold prediction. Well, wink, wink, maybe. We got that next week. Jazz Chisholm just needs to stay healthy, and they've got some young guys that could blossom as well. On the National side, they finished 52 games below, they were 55 and 107, so they were awful. They were 36 games below 500. But Joey Meneses has become the star of the WBC. I don't know if you've been watching or following any of that, Mr. Anderson or Mr. Kelly. Yeah, especially against the USA. Joey Meneses was a thorn in our side offensively with a couple of home runs. He's there with the Nationals. They've got Lane Thomas, C.J. Abrams, Keibert Ruiz as well. But it would be hard to see them with less than 100 losses again this year. So it's an interesting division, Ivan and Tom, and I wonder what your guys' thoughts are. I still think it's pretty top heavy with the Braves and the Mets.
I'm going to go first because I know Tom's going to have a lot to say. I know he's happy that Verlander is gone, and that's one thing he's going to be like, good riddance, that he get to spend the money. It's really strange because I still think Philly is going to be a rising tide. I just think that team has enough arms to get them into that. I guess I'm just so impressed with the way they finish. I know how they started last year. But if you would have watched the last 20 games, you could see that there was just the momentum that they had going into the postseason. And I just see them kind of picking up that momentum going into the start of the season. I'm not making any predictions right now because I know we're doing that next week. But we talked about Atlanta, New York. I'm thinking it's going to be more like Philly, Atlanta. And I'm not sure what New York is going to do.
Okay, there's no right or wrong here at this point.
No.
It's all conjecture, obviously. But the sentiment seems to be that there's a lot more promise on the Mets side because of Scherzer and Verlander, and hard to argue because those two guys are Hall of Fame bound when they're done. They've also still got Pete Alonso, Francisco Lindor.
JD,
yeah.
Question for you, but how many games did Scherzer miss last year?
That's a great question. I'd have to look that up.
I know he missed plenty of games.
Not as much as Jacob DeGrom, and DeGrom's not on that staff anymore. He's battle tested much more than Jacob DeGrom has ever been. So
True.
He's going to bring some fire and intensity, just like Justin Verlander is going to as well. So I like what they're doing. I mean, you're right. They have to stay healthy for them to be, even sniffing 101 wins again this year. But I don't know. I think they're going to be feasting on the Nationals and Marlins most of the year. If Philly sneaks in, I mean, I just don't see them winning the division per se, but there's no reason why they can't get into a wild card again and do exactly what they did last year and get all the way to the World Series that way.
I agree with you. Mr. Tom, I'm waiting for you.
I think there is a reason they won't do that, and the reason is because Bryce Harper isn't going to be up there making the team happen. And quite frankly, the Phillies go where Bryce Harper goes, and if he's not there, they're not there.
It really is hard to replace the heart and soul of a team, regardless of whether or not he has offensive production or not. Just him being there and part of that lineup, is going to be interesting to see how the rest of that Phillies lineup responds.
As for the Mets, this is going to sound kind of catty, but I hope they don't make it. I think it's not healthy for baseball if they run the board here. But more than that, they went out and they got the most expensive piece for every hole they think they had, and they found the most expensive piece to put in there. That's never, ever worked before. Not in baseball.
Yeah.
So
it's true.
I don't think it's going to work this time either. Love the Braves. Love what they've been doing. You're right. They're as deep as any team and deeper than most. They can afford to let Swanson go and shrug their shoulders at it. Watch out for the Braves. And this is not a flashy team. This is not a team that everybody has on their radar all the time. And I think what you're going to see is just them very slowly, steadily. They win 2 out of 3 out of pretty much every series, and the next thing you know, the season's just about over, and they've walked away with it.
Yeah, they've got.
They grind you out.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because you lose a guy like Freddie Freeman, who you thought was going to be their everything, and maybe he was to a certain extent, but you replace him with a guy like Matt Olson at first base, and they don't miss a beat. They win 101 games because they find young pitchers like Strider, and then they get Mike Soroka perhaps back, who was one of the up-and-coming aces that was injured over the last year and a half because of knee problems. So,
and Sean Murphy is a stud. What a steal. What a steal.
Yeah, they get him and Travis d'Arnaud still there, platooning at catcher. So they're just loaded. Austin Riley is probably the most unassuming superstar in all of MLB at third base for the Braves. And they still got Albies, they still got Acuna. I mean, they're just loaded and they're young. So it's I think they have the depth to be able to sustain any potential big injuries. If they had a guy like Bryce Harper on their team that was going out for half the year, I still think they'd be okay. Phillies, I'm not so sure.
Right. there's no one player on the Braves that's indispensable.
Right. Agreed.
Okay.
No, it's a true glove.
But I think you do have indispensable players on Philadelphia. Well, really the rest of the division here.
Yeah, and I just don't see. I think the Marlins and the Nationals are going to be just floundering, pun intended, because of the division that they're in. I mean, they just have such a big hill to climb against three potential heavyweights in the National League that it's going to be tough to see either one of them sniffing the 500 mark this year.
Yeah, it's going to be really tough.
He only missed 20 games, by the way. So you're right.
Who's Scherzer?
Scherzer, yeah. It's only 20.
Wait, he missed 20 starts or missed 20 games?
Well, it was 20 games. I think it was 20 games for the injury. Because I remember that injury keeping him out pretty well. So I thought it was 20 games.
Okay, so that's a
I'll have
month.
to check my facts.
That's a lot.
That's a month.
Yeah. Well, the injury was pretty significant. I don't remember what it was exactly, but I do remember him. They were bringing him back slowly, so they had him pitching minute. Well, they were restricting his pitches.
That's 4 or 5
The one
starts.
thing that the Mets always have as well, more than any other team probably in this division, is the pressure of being in New York.
Yep.
And obviously they've got the Yankees shadow, on them at all times. But it'll be interesting to see if $500 million can win you a division title or even a World Series. And I agree with you, Tom. I don't know that that's possible.
I don't think it is.
It just, that's not the way baseball works. It's always been, well, like last year's Phillies. It's always been like that. There's always that team that they're a team.
Yeah.
And well, we'll see.
Well, it'll be an interesting division for sure, and we'll talk about our predictions next week. Coming up, though, we got the NL Central, which I know Tom probably has a little bit of stake in. I know he's a big Astros fan, but I know he's a big Cardinals fan as well.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about the NL Central in just a moment. You're listening to TNCRadio.live.
Do you have the TNCRadio.live app? It's free and easy to download. Just go to app.tncradio.live, Google Play, or the App Store. Get access to live streaming radio developed by drivers for drivers. Download the TNCRadio.live app today.
Hi, I'm Dr. Christopher Cortman, and now for the Mental Health Minute. Many years ago, there was a psychologist, Dr. Gordon Allport, who introduced a concept called functional autonomy. What does that mean? Well, interestingly, it means that we start a behavior for some reason or another, and then that behavior takes on a life of its own and has no connection whatsoever to the original reason or reasons we started it. Let me give you an example. A girl starts smoking cigarettes at age 13 because she wants to seem grown up or cool or connected with her friends or whatever reasons. She's still smoking at 47, and it has nothing to do with the original reasons she started. Now she's smoking because, for one, she's addicted to the nicotine. Maybe another reason is she's tried before to quit and she gained a bunch of weight. But it has nothing to do with the original reason. Her behavior now has a functional autonomy. It exists on its own, even though it has nothing to do with the original reasons why she started. So what do we do with this information? Well, hopefully, we understand why we're doing what we're doing now, and then look for ways to change that behavior. So in the case of this woman, we understand that there's an addiction to the nicotine, so that needs to be addressed. And we understand that there's a concern about gaining weight, so we have to address that. In other words, the original reasons, we don't need to look at them because the behavior is now connected to the current motivations to continue smoking.
I'm Ron Samuels. We put it in reverse gear so you can enjoy the history of popular music and hear the soundtrack of life Wednesdays at 8 Eastern and 7 Central, right after the train station on tncradio.live.
Well, welcome back to segment 3.
Who is that?
I don't know.
Were you trying to tell us the rest of the story?
No, it's an inside joke for you and I don't want to say the name because if I say the name, I'd now be in trouble with my wife.
I know where you're going. Yeah.
Thank you.
You and I would be the only ones that know.
Yes.
Yeah. It'd be as far deep of an inside story as we could get.
Oh, yes.
That'd be the deepest rest of the inside story, for sure.
All right. We're in the Central League and St. Louis Cardinals. The Cardinals.
St. Louis who?
The Cardinals.
Cardinals? Yeah.
Cardinals.
We just got done previewing the NL East. Let's move on to the NL Central now. And I know Tom will probably want to jump in here first on the Cardinals, I'm sure. But what I found interesting in doing research for this whole preview is you realize that the franchise in St. Louis, the Cardinals, hasn't finished below 500 since 2007.
That's pretty good.
That's remarkable
in
today's game, in any professional sport, especially with the amount of turnover as there are with players, within these franchises. So have a team that has not finished below 500 since 2007 is pretty remarkable. And I really don't see it happening again this year either. They got free agent Wilson Contreras on a 5-year deal to replace the retired Yadier Molina. But they still got potential MVP candidates, Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado, manning the corner infield spots. I guess the biggest question is always going to be their pitching. But, as long as Adam Wainwright is still pitching at 65 years old, then he's even leading the USA in the World Baseball Classic right now. So, congrats to him. And it's fun to see guys last that long with a certain team as well. Yeah. The other team that really is the headliner in this division are the Milwaukee Brewers. They really faded down the stretch last year, but their starting pitching rotation is easily the biggest strength of this team with Corbin Burns, Brandon Woodruff. They got Freddie Peralta as well, but what they really need is Christian Yelich to return to his MVP form for them to have any chance to supplant Cardinals as the division winner here. It's possible, but the Cardinals are deep too. I don't want to say they're as deep per se as the Mets or Braves, but amongst all the teams in this division, the Cardinals, top to bottom, still have the deepest roster of any team here. The Cubs, they went out and spent some money. They got the aforementioned Dansby Swanson to play shortstop. They also got Eric Hosmer. They got Tucker Barnhart. They got Trey Mancini, and Cody Bellinger came over from the Dodgers. And if they're healthy, they could put up some runs. But can the pitching staff limit opponents enough to make this a 500 team again? Hard to say, and I wouldn't bet on it, but you never know. The Pirates and Reds are awful. They're just not good at all. And it's funny, as I was writing some of this out, they both finished at 62 and 100 last year. Pirates haven't had a winning season since 2015, and arguably their best player, Brian Reynolds, has already requested a trade this offseason after not being able to sign an extension. And that's going to be looming over a Pittsburgh team that just can't win already anyway. It's hard to say anything nice about this team, so I won't say anything at all. The Reds, there's going to be a lot of visiting fans at that Great American Ballpark. And, if they didn't have a nice ballpark, maybe they'd be the A's of the Midwest. But they actually have a nice ballpark to go to, and I would go to that place anytime. They've got Hunter Green and Nick Lodolo, who are young, up-and-coming starting pitchers. But I think the story all year, kind of like with Detroit, is what's going to happen with Joey Votto. Is he going to be able to stay through and end his career as a Cincinnati Red, or is he going to finally get traded somewhere and be an impact bat, potentially off the bench for some team that may be going to the playoffs at the deadline? And so, again, I think it's going to be the Cardinals and the Brewers at the top of this division again, like it was last year. Cubs may be creeping up a little bit, but I just don't see much improvement for Pittsburgh and Cincinnati this season.
You know, it's really interesting. Real quick, Tom, because I know you're going to jump in here. I like what the Cardinals have, and I like the way you said, you know, they're kind of like the Steelers, you know, the fact that they've been 500 for a very long time, even though they win nothing. And I would be very disappointed to be at 500, and I couldn't get past the Phillies. And that's going to be a real interesting. I'm really going to pay attention to the Cardinals this year, especially after getting that 5-year deal. I'm really going to be interested to see what they do. And I think the problem that they're going to have, it really is going to be some arms to go that second half of the season. And I like the way you talked about the bottom three. I'd put Chicago in that bottom three: Chicago, Pittsburgh, and Cincinnati. The Reds haven't done anything in so long. I always forget that the Reds are actually our baseball team right now.
Oh, you're formerly from the Natty.
Thank you. I know. And it is a beautiful stadium. It's wonderfully positioned. You get some nice, cool breezes in there. But I'm looking at Milwaukee and I'm looking at St. Louis, but I just don't see these three teams. I would not want to pay. You know, usually you think of Chicago, you think of Wrigleyville, and, you know, going to Wrigley and just having a good time. And usually they'll do a doubleheader, and you kind of like those doubleheaders. So now they would do with no lights, and they would do one with lights. And I don't know, it's not the same when your team can't win. You know, they're doing okay, but I think once you win that World Series, you get that pennant, you get that World Series, there's some expectations that's put on you, and they're having a hard time living up to that expectation. And we'll see what happens this year.
All right. Well, hey, real briefly, starting at the bottom of the list here. At first, I think the best thing we can say about Cincinnati is that all three of us say Cincinnati instead of Cincinnati.
We could throw Skyline Chili in there
Yes.
if you want.
Yeah. The Pirates, hey, guys, thanks for showing up. And, you know, they gave
That
us something
team's
to
rated
do.
R.
Yeah. The Cubs, it's just sad right now. Yeah, they seem rudderless. I'm not sure about a single pickup they did in the offseason that it makes any sense. It's like we're going to take a bunch of pieces and we're going to throw them all together and we think it makes a puzzle. But then again, maybe it doesn't. It might just be a mess. I just don't see the Cubs. I mean, they could be worse than last year. I know a lot of people had them on the list as most improved team this year. Well, why? Why? I don't see them improving.
They to me, I think their underlying thread will be how they look at the trade deadline, because they've got a bunch of guys that they brought in that are potential movers at the deadline to help replenish their farm system.
Which is what I think they're really doing.
Yep, I agree.
Speaking of which, I think the only question for the Brewers is how much can they get for Corbin Burns?
Yeah, they can't really get much more out of him or Brandon Woodruff. So,
well, I mean, Burns is, they burned Burns, you know, and he's mad and he doesn't want to be there anymore. And he's going to go out there and throw as hard as he can and look as good as he can so that he can get picked up by a winner there at the deadline. What can Milwaukee get for him? They'll get a lot.
Yeah, I agree.
And so they're looking forward to seeing what they can get for him. Expect him to go a little bit early. He may be the first guy off the board as we get closer to the trade deadline, simply because there's going to be some team, and I wouldn't be surprised even if it's the Mets. Let's say Scherzer and Verlander don't hold up. The Mets may be right there saying, "Okay, what you want?" And they'll just back up the truck for him.
I foresee if the Brewers are just, hovering around that 500 mark, especially near the trade deadline, and the Dodgers and Padres are battling it out like they are predicted to do, that one of those two teams is going to be knocking real hard on that
real
Milwaukee
hard.
door.
But last year they looked good, and everybody thought they were going to be buyers and they were sellers. I just don't see any way that they hold on to Burns much past July 1st.
And the same could go for Yelich.
By the All-Star break. Yeah. So,
which gives the Cardinals a chance to really run away with this division.
If
they get off to a hot start, especially, look out.
I love my Cardinals, but I think they win this going away more by default than anything else, because everybody else is just so bad. All the Cardinals have to do really is just play their level of baseball. Just go do your thing.
Right.
Don't try to win every single game. Go out there and play well, play strong, and you'll be right there knocking on the door come playoff time.
Yeah, they finished 93-69 last year, which was a 7-game advantage over Milwaukee. They could finish with that same exact record and probably win that division by 10 games this year.
Oh,
just
easy,
depending on how
easy.
the Brewers, start this year.
Well, the Brewers started last year great.
Yeah.
And what did that get them?
86-76 and missed the playoffs. Yeah.
So we all agree that the only team that's coming out of the century that has any hope really is the Cards.
Yeah.
Well, maybe next week we'll find out.
The Cards.
That was what we call a teaser. Yeah. Well, that's the end of our third quarter. The shot clock just went off, buzzer, and we need to take a break. We'll be back for the fourth quarter right here on Clutch Time Sports at TNCRadio.live.
Hear the best of TNCRadio.live every night. It's TNC Radio Primetime. Interviews, music, information, and news you can use every night. 7 to 9 Eastern, 6 to 8 Central, TNC Radio Primetime.
5 tips for becoming a great truck driver. Being a truck driver is a rewarding career, but being a great truck driver is even more rewarding. Truck driving is not an easy job. It requires hard work and dedication. Truck drivers take pride in the hard work they do. After all, without truck drivers, our grocery and convenience stores would be empty. Whether you're a rookie or a veteran driver, there's always room to improve your skills as a truck driver. Here are 5 tips for becoming a great truck driver. Safety. Truck driving is considered one of the most dangerous jobs in America, so safety must be a driver's number 1 priority. Truck drivers are responsible for keeping their freight, themselves, and other motorists on the road safe. Other drivers on the road may not know the difficulties and challenges truckers face on the road, so truck drivers may have to go the extra mile to ensure everyone's safe on the road. Prioritize health. A truck driver will prioritize their health. After all, taking care of your health can help you have a long-lasting, successful career as a truck driver. It's no secret that truck driving is considered an unhealthy profession. Drivers lack healthy food options, exercise, and a good sleep schedule. Stay compliant with federal regulations. Trucking rules and regulations are monitored by 2 organizations, one at a state level and one at a federal level. The trucking rules and regulations are established at a federal level. Staying compliant with federal regulations is essential for keeping yourself and others safe on the road. It can also save you from getting fines, which in return saves you time and money. Maintain a clean driving record. The best way to avoid traffic violations is to be aware of all the moving and non-moving violations you could get. Certain violations can affect the eligibility to operate a commercial motor vehicle. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration provides a list of violations. If you're issued a citation for FMCSA safety violations, your CDL could be in danger of suspension. Here are some things that can cause you to get a point on your driving record or possibly a suspended CDL. Speeding, following too close, overweight, traffic violation, reckless driving, driving without proper endorsements, logbook errors. Drivers must be aware that any type of violation could result in a loss of their CDL. Balance trucking and home life. The last tip for becoming a great truck driver is balancing truck and home life. Truck driving is hard and demanding work. Becoming a truck driver means spending many hours and days on the road. You'll sacrifice a lot for your trucking career. For many long-haul truck drivers, it's hard to separate life at work from life at home. Learning how to have a balance between home life and work life is essential if you want to have a long-lasting career in truck.
Hi, I'm Shelley Johnson with TNCRadio.live. You know me for the Truckers Network radio show and Women Road Warriors that I co-host with Kathy Tuccaro. We know that life as a driver is not easy. Do you believe in the power of prayer? Whether you're moving down the highway or taking a break, you can take a moment right now to tell God about your hopes, concerns, and gratitude. Do you want someone to pray with? No problem. Just call the TFC Global 24-hour prayer line. It's 866-515-9406. That's 866-515-9406. Or if you're using the TNCRadio.live app, just press the prayer line button to be connected to a prayer warrior who will confidentially pray with you and for you. Thank you, and God bless.
Oh, yes. It's that time. You know, I miss saying my Trey Rings. Just to say it just sounds so nice. But we're here at the West, the Dodgers. We're not talking about the Dodgers. We're talking about the Dodgers in the West. Mr. JB, take her away, baby.
Yeah, we've finalizing our NL preview of Major League Baseball with the National League West here in our fourth quarter. And two teams that are, for all intents and purposes, at least on paper, the front runners, perhaps for getting to the World Series for the National League. That would be the Dodgers and the Padres. The Dodgers finished at 111-51 last year, which was the most by a National League team since the 1906 Cubs. Who would have ever had the Cubs as a National League wins leader, at any point? But yeah, the Cubs actually won 111 games in 1906. The Padres, of course, major headlines. They got Xander Bogaerts from the Red Sox, 11 years, $280 million deal. Manny Machado has signed an extension. They've still got Juan Soto. Fernando Tatis is coming back. They actually got a pretty sneaky move in there. They got Nelson Cruz on a 1-year, $1 million deal to be their DH. Their bullpen was probably their weakest spot, but their starting rotation can rival just about any in the National League, where the Dodgers still got Freddie Freeman, Mookie Betts, Gavin Lux, one of their younger guys who they were hoping would step in for Trey Turner, has already hurt himself during spring training, is out for the year. That's a big blow already. Their pitching's kind of old and more suspect, I think, than any time in the last 5-10 years for this team. So to get to 111 wins, I don't think they need to get to that mark to win the division. I still think they can win 100, though, with what they have. They just got to keep Clayton Kershaw healthy. They got to keep Julio Urias healthy as well. And as far as the rest of the division, it's interesting. The Giants probably had the most eventful offseason of any team in the National League, especially with that whole Carlos Correa fiasco. But they had some pretty sneaky signings. They got Michael Conforto, Mitch Haniger. They did not get Aaron Judge, even though he was a player. The Giants were a player on them. But they got Sean Manaea and Ross Stripling to help solidify the rotation. They got Taylor Rogers to join his twin brother Tyler in the bullpen. Giants finished at 81-81 last year. And if you can believe it, that was the first time in their franchise history that they finished exactly 500 for a season. 81-81, kind of a strange stat. The Diamondbacks are young and up and coming too. Corbin Carroll is kind of a sexy pick to perhaps be an MVP candidate in the NL this year. They got Jake McCarthy, Alec Thomas, and others that really are talented in the outfield for Arizona. They got Lourdes Gurriel from Toronto in the Dalton Varsho trade. Christian Walker hit over 30 home runs last year. It's going to be all about the pitching for them. Zach Gallen and Merrill Kelly really stepped up to be top-of-the-line starters last year. And Madison Bumgarner is still on that team, but they still finished 14 games below 500 last year. So I take that back, 7 games below 500 last year. So do they come back and make a bigger leap this year? It's entirely possible. The Colorado Rockies are terrible I don't know that you want to put them necessarily in that Washington Nationals, Cincinnati Reds zone, because they still have Chris Bryant and C.J. Cron, Charlie Blackmon, some of those guys that can really hit. But boy, if all three of those guys, maybe Chris Bryant will stay on that team because of the length of his contract that he got at the beginning of last year. But C.J. Cron, Charlie Blackmon, those are all huge potential trade pieces for the Rockies when we get to the deadline. And they finished 68-94 last year, and I can't see them getting any better than what they finished last year.
Who did the Rockies was a free agency? They lost one of their bats.
Not this year.
Last year.
Yeah, they've been pretty stripped over the last couple of years. So they've gotten younger, and they just haven't. It's funny because we talk about the humidor a lot last year, where the humidor got put into every major league ballpark. So it's kind of slowed things down, even in Colorado to an extent. But they just, when they were really good, they just out-hit everybody, and they never had quite enough pitching. I mean, they got swept by the Red Sox in the only World Series that they have ever been in, and at this point, they just seem to be one of those franchises that really have no direction right now.
It's so funny because when I think about the Dodgers, and I'm not a Dodger fan, but I respect them because of the history, them coming from Brooklyn. And of course, you just had that history of Jackie Robinson. And when you walk into Chavez Ravine, it's still the only, it's the last of the old stadiums. And there's something when you get a good ticket, you go down, you get to see the museum, and you get to eat all the food you want. You get to sit down behind home plate, and it's just the nostalgia of just being in Chavez Ravine. And a lot of people call it Dodger Stadium, but if you're from around here, we call it Chavez Ravine, and you love a great game there. But for me, I still say and you're right, the Dodgers are getting older, but I think the Dodgers will move as Clayton Kershaw moves and Mookie Betts move. I mean, those two, even more so than Freddie Freeman. So if Kershaw's doing right and Betts is doing right, they'll do something. I mean, let's remember, even though they were 111-51, this is also the team in the postseason lost to the Padres for the first time that I could ever remember them experiencing. And the Padres, I mean, they signed Soto, which was a great sign for them. But I thought that they were going to have a batting duel last year with Junior. And, he's just showing he's still immature and he's just not ready to play baseball like his dad played. So I'm looking at your Giants, and I know you love your Giants. That is a strange number, 81 and 81. Your Giants, I think they've got some arms there. And I think the Giants are going to kind of surprise people this year. I don't think they're going to be at the top of the mound in the West, but I think they're still going to surprise people. And I've never been a Diamondback fan. I mean, I'm sorry. I still see that game in my head and Super Mario pitching, and we pretty much thought we had a World Series. And I still can't believe the D-backs beat us. And when I say us, I'm talking about the New York Yankees. That game, that still rings in my head to this day. I cannot get over how did we lose that series. I still can't believe we did.
Kurt Schilling and Randy Johnson had a lot to do with that series, that's for sure.
Yeah, they did, but nobody expects Mario to get hit on like he got hit on that at that time. And I've never been a Rockies fan. I don't even like the stadium. Coors Field to me is just, it's an okay stadium, but the Rockies don't have anything. They have nothing to offer, so I don't even want to talk about them. Go ahead, Mr. Tom.
Yeah, they're pathetic, and Arizona's got some pieces. They're pathetic too. Look, we're going to find out whether or not what they've built in San Diego is real. I think it is. I think we're going to be stunned. Los Angeles, by their own admission, cutting corners everywhere they can. They don't even have anybody to play up the middle at this point. If I'm a Dodgers fan, I'm worried.
Yeah.
This has the potential. I'm not saying it's going to happen because we're not saying what's going to happen right now. But this has the potential to be a disaster year for Los Angeles. It has that kind of potential.
And I can't.
And that's not good. Yeah, and that's not good.
Yeah,
you can't go from 111 to 51 in 1 year and just fall like 70, 80 games. You just can't do that.
You heard what I said about Houston last week.
Yeah.
Think about everything I said, times, infinity for the Dodgers. Guys, we're out of time. Sorry to tell you.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, no, I saw it running out. We're going to have our predictions and everything next week, so join us for the finale of this MLB preview. Thank you, everyone, for listening to Clutch Time Sports right here